Hello, I'm Michael from Part-Time Permies, and we're going to do a little quick cooking demonstration. So tonight we're going to prepare dinner with almost all local foods, and we're going to talk about some old techniques and some new techniques and show you what we've done tonight. So the first thing we're going to talk about is sort of a new technique. It's called sous vide. So sous vide is directly translates to under pressure. And so in simple terms, it means cooking in a bag and controlling our heat. So I have a simple setup here. This is a technology that sort of became popular into the 60s in France. And with some of the very high-end chefs, it's become more available and understood. And now has become a home available device. Instead of costing thousands of dollars, you're talking under $200. I happen to be using a Joule, which is one of a variety of products on the market. All of them work fairly similarly. I like the Joule just because it has programmability and it has a web interface, and I can put it on a network or I can put it on Bluetooth, which allows me to program it and to have it respond and alert me to changing conditions or when an item's done. So what we've got here is a very simple device. I'm going to take this bowl off. It's just a weight. This is basically an electric heating element with a small propeller fan in it that circulates water. So it's called a Circulator. So what it does is keeps my water temperature within 1 or 2 degrees of where I desire it to be, and it moves the water around. So this comes out of some basic laboratory technology. I circulate with good, clean water. I don't make a soup with it because I don't want to get the device too dirty. And I simply set the temperature for it, and it takes over from there. Sous vide, cooking under pressure, involves a couple of things. One, some form of a bag, so that could be as simple as what we're doing, a Ziploc bag. Or you could use a simple home food saver that does vacuum sealing, or what's commercially called a cryovac. So then I would take the bag, I would extract some of the air from it, most of the air from it, and I would seal it, allowing me to preserve the food either for freezing or for cooking. The advantage of this is I can get direct water contact to my food without diluting it with water or gravies or other things. I also don't have any dehydration. The amount of hydration that I have in the bag will stay in there. And I can also potentially go right from refrigerator or freezer into my water source. So I'm preparing 2 items here for our meal. The first item is some pork shanks. So these are local pork shanks that I believe have been smoked, so they are basically already cooked. There's 2 of them here. This is literally the commercial packing from a local farm seller, and I have 2 options. In this case, I just put it in there because it's already seasoned from the ham brine. Alternatively, I may want to put simple things in like thyme and bay leaf, peppercorn, a few drops of olive oil, or a little bit of salt and pepper. We do that in a variety of ways. It's sort of different than your regular seasoning because you don't lose anything, it doesn't fall off or drips of liquid. So you need to be very precise about your measurements of seasonings. There are books and online sources that go into a lot of detail. So I want to use very controlled amounts, sometimes even weight. I would actually measure the weight of the main product, and I will create a percentage of other ingredients, including seasoning, which gives me a very high precision cooking medium. The other thing I want to be a little careful is I can go to some pretty low temperatures on this. I can technically go below food safety codes allow, and so I could have some possibility for food safety risks. In this case, I'm cooking at well above a safe cooking temperature, which is usually 145 degrees. I am cooking up around 168 degrees, I believe. But my other advantage, so my disadvantage is I need to be careful of my cooking temperatures. I also need to be careful of the herbs and spices that I put in here if I'm cooking for a very long time. A very long time might be 24 hours, 48 hours, because botulism would be my main risk. So I'm a little careful with that. The other thing that I'm looking at is the ability to control a low temperature. So instead of using a high temperature, I can use a very low temperature, and I can expand my cooking time instead of from minutes to hours or days. And that will allow my tougher pieces of a meat product to break down slowly, but at the same time not dehydrating or toughening meat, other parts of the meat. I can receive a really intact, tender product. So there's lots of things I can do with this. I could control my temperature for a perfect steak. I could control tenderness, keeping something really tender. I could also take something that's generally the best use is for things that are generally tough cuts. Shanks, briskets, pot roast, neck bones, things that have a lot, that would, duck legs, that I could be challenged to get them tender. Yeah, you like that, don't you? Shanks are perfect. So these have cooked. I put these in the morning, and I raised the temperature quite a bit. So at this point, they should be near falling off the bone, tender, but intact. And I may sear them here at the end just to create some additional flavor and texture. I have an opportunity to sear for color and flavor before I put it in the bag, or to do that at the end, or not do it at all. The second item I have is some squash. This squash was only put in a couple hours ago. It was semi-cooked. This happens to be turban squash. And there's a little bit of honey, a drop of maple syrup, a pinch of salt and pepper, and a very small amount of butter that were put in here. So I'm actually seasoning and infusing my flavors, many of my flavors right here into the squash or pumpkin. As a side note, this is a turban squash because it has a characteristic shape that might look sort of like a turban. It has all kinds of great colors. They can vary from squash to squash, and this is the top side, so it looks like a giant acorn. It is one of the more flavorful squashes and fairly common. It has a good texture, a firm texture. It tends to be fairly sweet and complex, and again, I would say it's in my top 3 or 4 go-tos for fall hard shell squash and pumpkin. The seeds are up in this area, so you would scrape them out of the top, and you have some flesh under the skin that could be recovered, or you could discard it. The majority of what's below is going to be your thicker squash. So this squash, not this one here, but this one was the first one out of our garden. It's been sitting around about a month. I used some of it for another process. I ended up peeling it down, and I put it on our smoker. I was smoking some ribs over the weekend. I put it on the smoker for a couple hours. So it took on a little bit of smoke, and it cooked most of the way. But I had plenty more than we needed. So this is the leftovers. It's about 2/3 of it. I think it's 2/3. No, it's half of it. So I just simply took it a little too firm, lightly smoked, nothing else done to it, a little bit dry on the edges, and put it in the bag with the same seasonings I spoke about. Maple, honey, salt, pepper, and a little bit of butter. So that has completed the cooking. At this point, it's relatively soft, and it's going to turn into more of a puree or a mash product that I'm going to use to complement the dinner. I once again have a few more oyster mushrooms and honey mushrooms that are from the local area and foraged. I'm trying to use them up because they don't last real long, and we like them. I have a little bit of garlic scape actually from late spring that's been sitting around and so good. So I'm just gonna saute these. I'm gonna saute them in a hot pan in some oil. That'll be a garnish. I am gonna have a puree of the squash, which I'm just gonna mash it up, and I'll readjust seasonings if needed, and then that will sit on the base. The shanks I am going to sear. I will dry them off, and then I will sear quickly in the pan if they don't fall apart. I will sear them to get some color and additional flavor and get some nice texture on it. And then I am going to finish with, this is Cherry Republic Sweet Cherry Balsamic Vinegar. We're in Michigan. We grow cherries as good as anybody does. And this is a fairly available product. So it's a balsamic that's been infused with cherry juices. I actually had it laying around the house for a long time. So we're going to just finish the top of everything with a little splash of this vinegar to kind of liven it up. I could reduce it down into a syrup or a little glaze, But for simplicity of home cooking, we're going to just throw a little bit on top of that. So that's going to be a pretty nice, that's a restaurant quality meal. This method of pulling, I'd actually take the very hot fat and I spoon it over the top in an effort to help balance my coloration in cooking. And the other thing that I can do is if I herb infuse it, if I drop some thyme in or rosemary or sage, nice fall flavors into this oil quickly and I browned it, it could be infusing some of those flavors from the oil onto the meat. So we're going to get a little fancy. I'm going to do a pretty big scoop of this puree. I could just set it in the middle of the plate or off to the side. Definitely be acceptable, and then put my main item in it. But a nice thing I can do, kind of stretch it. Now this is, if it's really thin, I can get a really nice stretch on this. And kind of smear it along the plate. This is rustic and thick on purpose. I'm just going to smear that, and that gives you some effect. For plating, it also gives you some ability to center your sauces or other things. All right, I'm just taking this off the heat. And set this right in there. I could actually set this up alongside there. Take my garnish mushrooms and do whatever I want with them, but so basically my mushrooms are a source of protein and sort of a, well, they're a fungus, but they're kind of a vegetable. Our squash is a starch vegetable, so it's serving as both a starch and our vegetable. We have our protein in our ham, a pretty generous chunk of that. And then, and this is a runny vinegar. I could make it into a syrup so it sticks on there a little better, but what I like about the vinegar is that acid brings forward flavor and it cuts through fat. So when you serve something fatty like duck or pork, sometimes you need a little vinegar. Think about barbecue sauce. Vinegar is a nice way to add some fruitiness, bring out the flavors, and then cut through some of that fat. So I'm just going to do a real simple vinegar finish. That's going to be the bulk of dinner for tonight. Thank you for watching. I am Chef Michael, and we are Part-Time Permies. Hello, I'm Michael from Part-Time Permies, and we're going to go somewhere else, dude.
Jello, leave it.
There is nobody there. Go away.
Take two.
Hello, I'm Michael from Part-Time Permies, and we're going to do a little quick cooking demonstration. We're going to prepare a dinner and talk about some new techniques and some old techniques. Jello.